Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, the Outsider's View from June 1st. If you want to keep up with everything that's going on in the world, but you don't want to drag down your entire life by listening to the news every day, then get the main stories right here once a week, and spend the rest of your time actually living your best life. So let's get right into it. This week started off with Russia launching a series of air assaults on Ukrainian cities, deploying hundreds of attack drones and dozens of missiles. Those strikes killed at least 12 people and injured dozens more, many of them civilians, in what Ukraine called the most extensive aerial bombardment of the 3-year war. Putin appears to be making it clear that he's pushing ahead with his plans for violent conquest while refusing to attend peace negotiations despite the threats of sanctions from the West. Ukrainian intelligence reports that Moscow is gathering its forces near the front lines in preparation for a summer offensive. President Trump responded to the attacks by condemning Putin in the strongest terms that he has used to date, saying, quote, "I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all. Okay, we're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kyiv and other cities." Nothing happened to Putin Trump. This is who he has always been. He fooled Bush, he fooled Obama, and he fooled you. But he has always been the guy that his actions reveal him to be. Later on social media, the president appeared to make a veiled threat against Putin by writing, "I've always said that he wants all of Ukraine, not just a piece of it, and maybe that's proving to be right. But if he does, it will lead to the downfall of Russia." Trump also continued to criticize the president of Ukraine, saying that Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way that he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. End quote. Zelensky has done everything you've asked him to do. And when it comes to Putin, where the focus needs to be, I think that it is growing increasingly clear that words have failed and will fail to bring about a peace. Action is the only road left at this point. Sanctions are going to be necessary, and not just from the United States. Either we want this to stop and we are willing to commit to that goal, or we aren't. But it's past time to decide. Because after 3 years, I don't think anyone can say that this is working. And having a different president at the helm has changed many things for the better, but obviously not this. Here, the change in the man isn't enough. Like the other areas where we have seen positive improvements, we need a change in policy. Last weekend, the president said that he was strongly considering new retaliatory sanctions on Moscow, but in recent days, he has walked back that idea, saying that he doesn't want to hinder a potential peace agreement, even though there is no reason to think that one will be forthcoming, whether we play nice or not. Back on the home front, on Sunday, a former police chief known as the Devil in the Ozarks, the name of the documentary that was made about him, a man who was serving a life sentence for murder and rape, escaped from a high-security prison in Arkansas by disguising himself with a makeshift outfit designed to mimic law enforcement, according to prison officials. Rand Champion, a spokesperson for the Arkansas Department of Corrections, said that it is unknown where Hardin got the materials to manufacture law enforcement uniforms. According to the New York Times, in 2016, Grant Hardin had a short tenure as police chief for a small Arkansas town known as Gateway, which is just a few miles away from the headquarters for Walmart. And throughout his law enforcement career, he was plagued with accusations of excessive force, bad performance, and he eventually resigned as chief after he was caught falsifying a police report. According to the Associated Press, 56-year-old Hardin was serving a 30-year sentence for the 2017 murder of James Appleton, a Gateway Water Department employee, and an additional 50 years for the 1997 rape of an elementary school teacher. Authorities deployed canines, drones, and helicopters to search the rugged Ozark Mountains for Hardin, and the search area keeps expanding as time passes. Recent heavy rainfalls further complicated the search efforts, although that could also hinder Hardin's escape efforts as well. Sheriff Charlie Melton urged local residents to lock their homes and vehicles and to call 911 if they noticed anything suspicious. Cheryl Tillman, the sister of James Appleton, the man who Hardin murdered, expressed her fears about the escape. She and other family members were witnesses at Hardin's trial. Hardin's escape comes just weeks after 10 inmates were able to escape from a New Orleans jail by crawling through a hole behind a toilet. 8 of those 10 fugitives have since been captured as of Tuesday. Speaking of dangers in the woods, on Wednesday, the American Parents Coalition urged parents to beware of sending their daughters to any YMCA camps this summer, warning that the group currently determines who will have access to overnight cabins, locker rooms, and showers on the basis of gender identity rather than biology. The coalition says that many YMCA facilities might not even inform the parents that boys could be bunking or showering with girls, creating concerns about both safety and privacy. Allie Marie, the executive director of the American Parents Coalition, told the Daily Wire that, quote, "Parents deserve the truth, especially when it involves the possibility that their children could be put in a situation where they're expected to share private spaces with members of the opposite sex. Too many YMCA branches are putting gender ideology ahead of child safety by allowing locker rooms, showers, and cabins to become a free-for-all. This is unacceptable. Parents must question their local YMCA to ensure their child's safety and advocate for sex-based spaces where they do not already exist." Nationally, the YMCA recommends that, quote, "all campers and staff have access to the facilities aligned with their gender identity." The guidelines for Camp Olson in Longville, Minnesota state that, quote, "requiring someone to use a bathroom or other gendered space of the gender they do not identify can be detrimental to an individual's well-being and safety and puts Camp Olson at risk for discrimination complaints." The policy adds that if a female is uncomfortable using the same facility as a male identifying as a female, then the female should use an alternate space, saying that no one should be required to use an alternative restroom because they are trans. So biological girls can be forced to use alternate spaces that would not be sufficient to accommodate all of them, and this doesn't harm them. But having a single trans child do that even once is completely unthinkable because they automatically count for more than dozens or even hundreds of biological girls do combined. The guidelines also stipulate the camp does not need to inform parents if a camper decides to identify as transgender at the camp. That is a gross overreach to try to make themselves the arbiters of the parent-child relationship. The American Parents Coalition said that the Lakeside Hills YMCA in New Jersey, the Door County YMCA in Wisconsin, and the YMCA of Metropolitan Detroit have similar policies. They recommended that parents everywhere reach out to their local YMCA to ensure that they are notified if their child might be forced to share a bathroom or locker room with someone of the opposite sex. But frankly, I simply wouldn't trust them. It's not worth the risk if these are their national policies. I personally recommend that you keep your kids away from them and find safe alternatives. In recent years, the YMCA has had several controversies break out after customers complained about the presence of males in female spaces. 82-year-old Julie Jamin said that she saw a man watching 2 young girls And after complaining about the presence of a male in female locker rooms, Jamin was told by pool staff that her language was discriminatory, and she was later banned for life from ever returning. In the ongoing lawsuit, Jamin says that the facility violated her First Amendment rights to free speech. Other incidents have occurred across the country, from Missouri to Ohio, where women and girls have complained about being exposed to naked men in female locker rooms. Now, after the story was exclusively reported by the Daily Wire on Wednesday, there was a backlash from concerned parents, and by Friday, the YMCA had scrubbed or restricted access to much of the content that was on their website relating to gender ideology and DEI. Ale Marie, the executive director of the American Parents Coalition, warned, quote, "After being called out for prioritizing radical gender ideology over child safety, the YMCA is scrambling to delete and hide the evidence. The YMCA can delete and hide as many web pages as they want, but American Parents Coalition will continue to push for policies that protect girls in sports and in private spaces," end quote. I just want to point out that taking down web pages doesn't mean that the policies themselves have actually changed, so parents should remain cautious. That isn't the same thing as, say, posting guidelines that officially restrict access to intimate spaces based on biology, or issuing policies that prevent YMCA workers from getting involved in subjects relating to gender ideology with campers while not informing the parents about what they are doing. Let's turn to a fun story after that one. And I love stories about our border czar, Tom Homan, who will, of course, be playing Tom Homan in the Tom Homan movie entitled Tom Homan. So, here we go. On Tuesday, Tom Homan taunted Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez about her threat that there would be consequences if her Democrat colleagues were punished for assaulting ICE officers on video at a detention center in Newark, New Jersey. Federal prosecutors have since charged Representative LaMonica McIver with 2 counts of assaulting, resisting, and impeding officers while allegedly trying to stop the arrest of Newark's mayor, Ras Baraka. Each charge reportedly carries a penalty of up to 8 years in prison apiece. This isn't a free-for-all. Politicians aren't privileged. They have to obey the laws just like everyone else does. As our representatives, they should actually meet a higher standard and be expected to set the example. And if any one of us assaulted federal officers, we would go to jail. You will too. Homan told Laura Ingraham of Fox News, "Remember just a couple of weeks ago, AOC went on social media saying if we put a finger on any of her co-workers, congresspeople that were at our Newark facility, there would be consequences." Well, guess what? We did it. I'm waiting for the consequences. Yeah, go ahead, AOC. Put him on the naughty step. Homan and Ocasio-Cortez have gone back and forth at each other for years after he humiliated her at a congressional hearing. This all escalated recently after Ocasio-Cortez dared Homan in a town hall to refer her to the Department of Justice for using her free speech rights to advise illegal immigrants on how to avoid law enforcement, which is not covered under free speech. The borders are quipped back on Fox News, "I take pleasure I can live in her mind rent-free every day." Wait, she has a mind? That's news to me, and to everyone else who's familiar with Congresswoman Barbie. When it comes to plans for other battles, last week Trump announced that his administration had developed an architectural draft for the Golden Dome project, which is a more advanced version of Israel's Iron Dome defense system. Canada immediately wanted in, and Trump has said that it will cost Canada around $61 billion to join, unless they want to become the 51st state. This, again, I mean, seriously, why exactly would we want another far-left state in the Union that would screw up the Electoral College along with the House and the Senate? I'd prefer to get their money, not their problems. I mean, don't get me wrong, Canada is lovely as a neighbor, and we are both naturally equipped to be prosperous trade partners. But like Francis Foster said, Canada is like that lovely little sister that you have affectionate memories of, but right now, she's going through that phase in life where she went off to college and came back a know-it-all who is so progressive that she is intolerably obnoxious right now. I mean, that situation is survivable if I'm a neighbor, but why would I want to adopt her right now, even if she wanted to be adopted, which she doesn't, before I see if she's going to grow out of this? Nevertheless, Trump posted this on Truth Social. I told Canada, which very much wants to be a part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer. Let it go, Trump. The joke got old a long time ago. Don't be that old guy in the room who got a laugh the first time and then kept repeating the same bit over and over, asking, "Do you get it? Do you get it?" The Golden Dome will finally bring Reagan's vision for an all-encompassing defense system to protect the United States into the realm of reality. It is projected to cost us around $175 billion, and it will be capable of shooting down hypersonic, ballistic, and cruise missiles from anywhere that they are launched, even if they are launched from space. The first $25 billion for the Golden Dome project is part of the House budget bill, which passed the House last week and now faces the Senate. Trump said that he expects the program to be fully operational by the end of his term, promising once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles even if they are launched from the other side of the world and even if they are launched from space. And we will have the best system ever built. We will truly be completing the job that President Reagan started 40 years ago, forever ending the missile threat to the American homeland. He also confirmed that Canada was in talks to join the program, but that they would have to pay their fair share rather than letting us bear the cost while they reap the benefits of our expensive military for free, simply because of their close proximity to us as a neighbor. Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, confirmed that he was in the middle of talks with the Trump administration about the Golden Dome. His spokesman said Canadians gave the Prime Minister a strong mandate to negotiate comprehensive new security and economic relationship with the United States. These discussions naturally include strengthening NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, and related initiatives such as the Golden Dome. This is the better path for everyone involved. Separate and each paying our own way. This helps us to foot the bill, and Canadians get to keep their pride in their country while also learning not to expect that they will be able to leave all of their defense expenses on the doorstep of their ally. You want in? I think you should too. I'd want in if I were you. That will be $61 billion. Now, how you choose to pay for that is, of course, up to you as a sovereign country. A country that is responsible for seeing to its own needs. You could raise your taxes, even though a large portion of your people already can't afford the sky-high costs of living there. Or you could cut some of your social programs, especially the whole eugenics thing. Governing is about prioritizing. And in this uncertain world, you might want to prioritize not being bombed by some lunatic above having a government that will foot the bill for its own people to off themselves. Or maybe You should only take in the number of immigrants that you can actually afford to care for. Whatever you choose is none of my business. The details of balancing your budget are up to you. But the world's biggest charity is now closed for good. We have our own social programs to fund and an exploding deficit as a result. We can't afford to pay for your expenses too, and we aren't going to anymore. In the past, you've ignored the basic necessities of life in order to pay for luxuries, such as your large social programs, because you believed that we would defend you if push came to shove. And that was probably true in the past. And hey, I'd still like to be a good neighbor and help out where I can. But that is us going above and beyond, which is something that we can only afford to do when we have the resources. That is not what we owe to you. I like you. You honestly seem like good people. But you've also got to stand on your own 2 feet, because we aren't Atlas, and we can't carry the entire weight of the world on our shoulders, especially not first world nations who are just as capable as we are. We can't pay for your basics so that you can spend your money on programs that we can't afford here because we're footing the bill for part of your necessities. If you were invaded, say if Russia decided to expand northward over the Arctic instead of westward, we would probably ride in and save the day because having a hostile force as our neighbor would affect us. But if you were bombed instead of invaded, I would feel really bad for you. Truly. I mean, you wouldn't deserve that, and civilian casualties are always tragic. But in that situation, I'd blame your government for not prioritizing the big and necessary things at the top of the budget and the extras that are nice to have, but not life and death at the bottom. I wouldn't feel like we had failed to protect you. I'd feel like the government that you elected had failed to protect you. And I'd stand by you in calling them out for that failure. You would have my full support and sympathy, but not my dollars. Good fences make for good neighbors. And if you want to share in the protection of our fence, then you're going to have to find a way to chip in. Speaking of getting fair deals, the federation that oversees high school sports in California is changing the rules for the girls' track and field eligibility after President Trump raged against the state for allowing a boy to compete against female athletes, and after he threatened to pull funding if this practice didn't stop and the state does not begin to comply with the executive order that officially bars biological men from competing in women's sport. On Tuesday, the California Interscholastic Federation announced that any female student who had lost out on qualifying for the state track and field championship because she was forced to compete against a male athlete will also be invited to the upcoming event after all, where they will apparently be forced to compete with the boys again. The rule change does not bar male athletes from competing against them at the championship this weekend. On Tuesday, President Trump ripped into California and its notorious governor, Gavin Newsom, for allowing high school boys to compete against females in track and field. Trump said that boys competing against girls is totally demeaning to women and girls, and he threatened to yank federal funding from the state, saying, quote, California, under the leadership of radical left Democrat Gavin Newsom, continues to illegally allow men to play in women's sports. This week, a transitioned male athlete at a major event won everything and is now qualified to compete in the state finals next weekend. As a male, he was a less than average competitor. As a female, this transition person is practically unbeatable. This latest trans athlete controversy centers around high school junior A.B. Hernandez, who is a boy who advanced to the state championships in the girls' long jump and triple jump. Hernandez beat out the high school senior Katie McGinnis at the Southern Section Finals on May 17th with a jump of 19 feet, 2 3/4 inches, compared to McGinnis's jump of 18 feet, 9.5 inches. The CIS solution was unlikely to quiet the outrage over boys competing against girls, considering that the female athletes would still be forced to compete against Hernandez this weekend. Sophia Lurie, the outreach director for the conservative Christian group California Family Council, said, quote, "CIF is scrambling. Damage control mode activated. Girls who were unfairly eliminated are suddenly back in for state this weekend. This is a step in the right direction, but let's be real. This never should have happened. Boys don't belong in girls' sports. CIF blames state law, but Title IX protects females." Then on Wednesday, after all of this additional pressure came to bear, the CIF clarified that its new policy for the upcoming track meet this weekend would still award girls their rightful places on the podium, even if a trans-identifying boy lands one of the top scores. Concerning the final events that are scheduled to take place Saturday and the qualifying event on Friday, CIF stated, "On Friday, May 30th, if necessary, in the high jump, triple jump, and long jump qualifying events at the 2025 CIF State Track and Field Championships, a biological female student athlete who would have earned the next qualifying mark will also be advanced to the finals." In a statement shared with the Daily Wire, the California Interscholastic Federation said that at the state championships, quote, "a biological female student athlete who would have earned a specific placement on the podium will also be awarded the medal for that place, and the results will be reflected in the recordings of the event." There is similar controversy concerning a trans athlete who is playing in softball in Minnesota, leading their team to the championships, a pitcher who is unbeatable. Minnesota is, of course, a trans sanctuary state that allows people to change their birth certificates, and the birth certificates don't even have to reflect that changes have been made. However, records for applications to change a birth certificate and records of the original birth certificate remain, so those records have been uncovered, and this pitcher is a biological boy whose fastballs are basically impossible for the girls' team to hit, and it is also causing danger as girls have been hit by fastballs that have been much more severe than what they receive when the pitcher is a biological female. So this battle continues to rage on. We saw it play out in Maine. We're seeing it play out in California. We're seeing it play out in Minnesota. But this is an 80-20 issue, and there are many trans people who do not support the idea of trans athletes being allowed in female sports. They still recognize the biological differences, the rights to privacy of female athletes, and the unfair biological advantages that are built in. So this is really an issue that Democrats need to move away from if they want to survive in the long run as a viable party. And speaking of controversies surrounding women's rights, Devin Labella, who is a stunt performer that appears in Horizon, filed a sexual harassment lawsuit in the Superior Court of California for Los Angeles County on Tuesday, citing an alleged incident from 2023 during the filming of Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 2. The lawsuit centers around what Labella is describing as a, quote, violent, unscripted, unscheduled rape scene that was directed by Kevin Costner. Labella claims that she was hired by the production company as a stand-in for the lead actress Ella Hunt during physical scenes, and that during that time her SAG agreement was violated. The terms of that agreement include a ban on, quote, any last-minute requests for nudity or simulated sex. According to People, the terms of that contract also require producers to give a 48-hour notice and get the performer's permission for any changes to intimate scenes, along with providing an intimacy coordinator for sex scenes. Labella says that she was slated to cover Hunt's non-intimate scenes on the day in question, but when Hunt arrived on set, the actress learned that Costner had requested a new scene, which would require actor Roger Ivans to climb on top of her violently taking up her skirts. According to USA Today, Hunt was allegedly upset by the violent nature of the sudden script change request, and she refused to film the new scenes. After she left the set, Costner is said to have asked LaBella to stand in, which she agreed to do without knowing why Hunt had departed without filming the scene. The lawsuit says LaBella did not know that involvement in the impromptu shot would go beyond standing in as a standard body double. She was not warned or prepared for Mr. Evans to perform or engage in any action on top of her, and first learned that Evans would mount her and violently pull her skirts up when he was already on top of her doing so. LaBella went into further detail about the specifics of what exactly made her uncomfortable in this scene, which I'm not going to get into those details. They are out there for anyone who wants the gory details. The complaint also says that the scene was broadcast publicly on monitors for the entire crew to witness, even though the set should have been closed due to the nature of the content that was being filmed. LaBella is suing for an unspecified amount of money over the alleged incident and has asked for a trial by jury. Now, I don't know if LaBella's claims are true. I wasn't there. But if they are, it sounds like she has a legitimate beef here. I mean, sometimes there is a whole other side to these stories, so I'll wait for the facts to come out before taking sides. But if this went down the way that she says it did, and if the rules of her contract are what she claims they are, then this is bad. I will only add one further thought right now, which is, when she realized what was going on, why didn't she just say, "This isn't in my job description," and walk? Stunt people make really good money, so presumably she could afford to refuse. I mean, I'm not victim blaming here. As someone who is horrible when it comes to drawing any sort of boundary with people, I get the whole it's awkward to say something when there's a problem thing. But that's why I'm not the kind of person who would do well in Hollywood, where you have to be able to do that. So why didn't that happen in this situation? In better and less controversial news, Maha continues to score more wins for public health. Skittles, which is made by Mars Inc., is no longer being made with an additive called titanium dioxide. The chemical is used to whiten foods and brighten colors. It was recently targeted in the Maha Commission report, which was headed by the Health and Human Services Secretary, RFK Jr. Vani Hari, also known as Food Babe, wrote this in a post online. "The momentum is unreal. Mars Inc. Skittles dropping titanium dioxide in the U.S., already banned in Europe due to DNA damage and cancer risks. Let's go." She added in her video, "This is one less toxin in the taste of rainbows." On Tuesday, a spokesperson for the candy confirmed to Bloomberg News that titanium dioxide had been removed from all Skittles production at the end of last year. According to the Maha report, over 2,500 food additives, including emulsifiers, binders, sweeteners, colorings, and preservatives, may be used to mimic the taste and textures of conventional food and increase its shelf life. Studies have linked certain food additives to increased risks of mental disorders, ADHD, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndromes, and even carcinogenic effects. Titanium dioxide, widely used in a range of candies and sauces, may cause cellular and DNA damage, end quote. Speaking of the people who are meeting and even exceeding expectations when it comes to the jobs that we hired them to get done, on Wednesday, our amazing Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, announced that the Trump administration would be implementing new visa restrictions on foreigners who are complicit in censoring Americans. He said, "Even as we take action to reject censorship at home, we see troubling instances of foreign governments and foreign officials picking up the slack. In some instances, foreign officials have taken flagrant censorship actions against U.S. tech companies and U.S. citizens and residents when they have no authority to do so. Today, I am announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign nationals who are responsible for censorship of protected expression in the United States. It is unacceptable for foreign officials to issue or threaten arrest warrants on U.S. citizens or U.S. residents for social media posts on American platforms while physically present on U.S. soil. It is similarly unacceptable for foreign officials to demand that American tech platforms adopt global content moderation policies or engage in censorship activity that reaches beyond their authority and into the United States. We will not tolerate encroachment upon American sovereignty, especially when such encroachment undermines the exercise of our fundamental right to free speech. He also posted this on X. Foreigners who work to undermine the rights of Americans should not enjoy the privilege of traveling to our country. Whether in Latin America, Europe, or elsewhere, the days of passive treatment for those who work to undermine the rights of Americans are over. Then, on Tuesday, Rubio issued a cable to U.S. embassies and consulates stating that the State Department would temporarily stop interviews abroad with foreign citizens who are applying for student and exchange visas. According to Politico, the cable read, "Effective immediately. In preparation for an expansion of required social media screening and vetting, consular sections should not add any additional student or exchange visitor visa appointment capacity until further guidance is issued in a separate telegram, which we anticipate in the coming days." Rubio also promised greater scrutiny for visa applicants with any ties to Communist China. But Rubio wasn't done yet. He also gave a fiery defense of Israel and the Jewish people, noting the constant failed attempts by different empires and groups throughout history to wipe out Jews. He declared, quote, "There can be no compromise with anti-Semitism. There can be no nuanced separation of hatred of Israel and hatred of the Jewish people." Rubio made these remarks in a pre-recorded video that was shown on Wednesday at the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance Ministers Conference in Jerusalem. In that video, he said, quote, "Golda Meir once said, 'It took Moses 40 years to find the only place in the Middle East with no oil. But Israel's wealth lay not under the ground, but in its people, the Jewish people, exiles, pilgrims, and dreamers from around the world who made the desert bloom into a high-tech superpower. Israel accomplished this miracle not by abandoning history and identity, but by embracing it. Sadly, some of Israel's neighbors have failed to appreciate how following Israel's example could have brought prosperity to the region. Instead, they chose war. They decided to impoverish their people in a futile effort to destroy Israel. They succeeded in the former while failing in the latter." And Rubio was not done with the brutal honesty yet. Oh no, he continued. "Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest bigotry. And given that we are all here today, it is also the world's most futile. Egyptian pharaohs, Roman emperors, Persian shahs, and Middle Eastern despots have sought to destroy the nation of Israel. Adolf Hitler dreamed of a world without Jews, an idea he shares with Hamas. Today, these regimes and empires have crumbled into dust, but Israel stands, and the Jewish people prosper. I pray for the day when the entire world will recognize the futility of anti-Semitism, when leaders will abandon self-destructive hatred and forge a new future and partnership with Israel by building on the Abraham Accords. Under President Trump's leadership, there are signs that the future may be closer than we dared dream, but only if we can overcome the futile, persistent evil of anti-Semitism can we reach that future. Rubio also spoke about the young couple who worked at the Israeli embassy who were murdered in cold blood at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. on May 21st by a bigoted supporter of Hamas, egged on by the less persistent calls for intifada, which is a call for murder and terrorism, and their cries of From the River to the Sea, which is a call for genocide against Jews. They have been promoting these cries for a year and a half and more, and somebody decided to put action behind the words that have been so persistently uttered. Rubio said the following: "Earlier this year, I stood beside Foreign Minister Sayer at the Yad Vashem Memorial. I remembered the millions of Jews who were slaughtered and reflected on the meaning of the words, 'never again.' The importance of those words were brought home to every American last week when Yaron Lachinsky and Sarah Milgram were murdered in cold blood outside the Capitol Jewish Museum here in Washington, D.C. Yaron was a Christian born in Germany who came to love the Jewish state. Sarah was from Kansas and loved Yaron. They dreamed of marrying in Jerusalem. Instead, they were cut down in cold blood by a monster who did not care about Yaron's faith or Sarah's background. We should never forget that as he was being arrested after killing two innocents who he believed were Jews, the murderer proudly screamed, 'Free, free, free Palestine!' Words that serve as a battle cry for the death of Jews, the destruction of Israel, and the horrors we must never again allow. There can be no compromise with anti-Semitism. There can be no nuanced separation of hatred of Israel and hatred of the Jewish people. Those who call to boycott Israel are calling for the boycott of their Jewish neighbors and classmates. Those who call for violence against Israelis are calling for violence against Jews. Those who call for the destruction of Israel are calling for the destruction of the Jewish people. That is why we extend our prayers to Yaron and Sarah's loved ones. We must stand in solidarity with Israel. There can be no coexistence with evil. There can be no nuance to hatred. Under President Trump, the United States will stand with the Jewish people. We have implemented a vigorous new visa policy that will prevent foreign nationals from coming to the United States to foment hatred against our Jewish community. We are holding international organizations and nations accountable for rhetoric against Israel that resurfaces in the manifesto of monsters like Yaron and Sarah's killer. But we do see an eventual light at the end of the long tunnel of suffering. One can imagine the Middle East in which the Abraham Accords eventually reign. Bravo! And just to clarify, he didn't say you can't criticize Israel or a policy of Israel. He said you cannot call for the death of Israelis without implying the death of Jewish people. You cannot call for the entire nation to be wiped out without that being a reflection of the people who are citizens of that nation. You can criticize a policy just like you can criticize any country's policy, but people do things when it comes to Israel that they would never do with another country, and they hold them to different standards than they hold to anyone else. This has been the war with the least amount of civilian casualties in a ratio from terrorist to civilian of any war that has ever been fought in all of human history in an urban area. That is a statistical fact. The ratio is 1-to-1 at worst, meaning one civilian killed for every one terrorist, and that is better than we or anybody else have ever done. So if doing better than everyone is still not good enough, then somebody needs to say exactly what Israel needs to be doing different, other than just allow Hamas to remain, allow them to torture their own people, and rebuild, and then we can do this all again in a couple years, which has been the cycle that everyone has been so thrilled to engage in for 80 years now, and beyond that, beyond even when the nation of Israel was founded. It's ridiculous. So stop with the false accusations that Israel is committing a genocide. A genocide is deliberately wiping out an entire people. Israel has dropped flyers, broadcast radio, fed the enemy population, done everything they can do to minimize casualties among civilians. Have there been a lot of casualties among civilians? Of course there have. That is what happens in war in urban areas. But no one has been able to point to a single thing that they should be doing that they are not doing and say, that's why it's a genocide. They say people are dying, so that's a genocide. Well, that is not the definition of genocide. So stop spreading propaganda and calling for intifada and terrorism and murder and genocide against the Jewish people, and then trying to claim that that is not anti-Semitism, or claim that you disassociate from the people who do what you have encouraged them to do in your sick and twisted Hilarion chants. I'm done. The Jewish story of overcoming adversity and surviving insurmountable odds and brutal attempts to wipe them out is not the only story out there that inspires people, and this week there was news relating to another beloved story. The three main characters for the HBO television adaptation of Harry Potter, which is scheduled to start filming later on this summer, have been announced. Dominic McLaughlin was cast in the lead role of Harry Potter. Arabella Stanton will play Hermione Granger, and Alistair Stout will play Ron Weasley, according to Variety, who added that more than 30,000 actors had auditioned for the three parts. The actors that have been chosen are all relatively unknown. The showrunner, Francesca Gardner, and the executive producer and director, Mark Myriad, released a joint statement saying, after an extraordinary search led by casting directors Lucy Bevan and Emily Brockman, we are delighted to announce that we have found our Harry, Hermione, and Ron. The talent of these three unique actors is wonderful to behold, and we cannot wait for the world to witness their magic together on screen. We would like to thank all the tens of thousands of children who auditioned. It's been a real pleasure to discover the plethora of young talent out there. Other confirmed stars of the highly anticipated TV series include John Lithgow as Albus Dumbledore, Janet McTeer as Minerva McGonagall, Papa Sidhu as Severus Snape, and Nick Frost as Ruvius Hagrid. Luke Thalen will also take on the recurring role of Quirrell Quirrell, while Paul Whitehouse is set to play the recurring role of Argus Filch. According to the show, the series will be a faithful adaptation of the beloved Harry Potter book series by author and executive producer J.K. Rowling. HBO executives have voiced support for the author of Harry Potter and defended their decision to keep her on as executive producer despite the backlash that she has received from leftists worldwide. The billionaire author has been labeled a TERF, meaning a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, because she rejects radical gender theory. Casey Bloys, the chairman and CEO of HBO and Max Content, made his priorities clear when he said, JK is an executive producer and her insights will be helpful. We are in the Harry Potter business. JK is a very online conversation. It's very nuanced and complicated and not something we're going to get into. Our priority is what's on screen. The Harry Potter story is incredibly affirmative and positive about love and acceptance, and that's our priority, what's on the screen. In other entertaining news, on Wednesday, British prosecutors announced that they will be charging Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan Tate with rape, human trafficking, and other crimes. According to Politico Europe, the Crown Prosecution Services confirmed 10 charges against 38-year-old Andrew Tate relating to 3 women. His younger brother, 36-year-old Tristan, faces 11 charges relating to 1 woman. The statement from the Crown Prosecution Services said, "We can confirm that we have authorized charges against Andrew and Tristan Tate for offenses including rape, human trafficking, controlling prostitution, and actual bodily harm against 3 women. The decision to move forward with these charges followed receipt of a file of evidence from Bedfordshire Police. A European arrest warrant was issued in England back in 2024, and as a result, the Romanian courts ordered the extradition to the UK of Andrew and Tristan Tate. However, the domestic criminal matters in Romania must be settled first. The brothers were first arrested in December 2022 by Romanian authorities. Initial charges in Romania were rape and human trafficking, but they have since been expanded to include sex with a minor and trafficking of underage persons. The Tates have said that they are innocent of all charges and portray themselves as the targets of a high-powered conspiracy meant to silence them. But, of course, that is the only bogus defense that scum like them can make for their own low-life behaviors. The Tate brothers are also under investigation in Florida. In March, Andrew Tate's ex-girlfriend, Brianna Stern, filed a lawsuit against him in California, alleging that he beat and abused her during their relationship. She also provided text messages to prove that Tate had warned Stern about speaking out against him. Tate's sleazy attorney had no better defense than to call the lawsuit a blatant cash grab, a desperate attempt by a sad individual to exploit Andrew's success and reputation for personal gain. Okay, the only sad individual in this situation is Tate. And what reputation? The reputation of a criminal pimp? That reputation? And what success? Renting castles where the only people who are willing to be within 10 feet of him are paid to do so, and starting a low-level pyramid scheme before going to prison for his crimes. That success? This is not a role model. This is a textbook loser. There was also some news on the economic front this week as well. On Thursday, one day after the Court of International Trade blocked President Trump from being able to impose some of his harshest Liberation Day tariffs on foreign countries, stock markets around the world surged. The New York Times reported futures for the S&P 500 index jumped 1.5%, suggesting that stocks will open sharply higher when trading begins in New York. They added that stocks rose in France, Germany, Hong Kong, Japan, and South Korea. The dollar also rose on Wednesday after the ruling. The yield on 30-year Treasury notes climbed back over 5%, and stocks for the chip giant Nvidia rose that day by more than 6%. However, given that the only tariffs that were blocked were the ones imposed using certain faulty grounds, the time was right to remind everyone that the ruling does not affect tariffs that were issued by the Trump administration under separate legal authorities, including levies on steel, aluminum and cars, and others that Mr. Trump has threatened on pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and other critical products. The Court of International Trade, which issued this ruling, has 9 judges that are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate, just like the Supreme Court judges are. This ruling against these particular tariffs was made by a tribunal of 3 of those judges, 2 of whom were appointed by Republicans, and 1 of those was appointed by Trump himself. So this ruling was not biased or overreach of the kind that we have seen when it comes to these nationwide injunctions issued by local district courts, which is why I have criticized those, but I'm not criticizing this as being the same thing. The court also noted that there are 2 other statutes that Trump could use in order to justify these tariffs, so he has other avenues that are available to him as he pursues his economic plans. But this one was apparently flawed, and that tends to happen when you move too quickly. Things have to be done the right way if you expect them to stand up in the long run. That's just the reality at hand. Trump had used the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act to justify his call for higher tariffs, and the use of that act under these circumstances is what has been overruled. The court gave Trump 10 days to end the tariffs that were put in place by invoking this act. According to analysts at the British Investment Bank, the court's ruling implies that ultimately extreme tariffs and rapidly changing tariffs are less likely to happen going forward, which reduces uncertainty somewhat. But in light of the fact that the Trump administration immediately filed plans to appeal the decision, the analyst also cautioned that in the immediate future, the ongoing dispute between the courts and the Trump administration will add significant uncertainty to the mix, making it even harder for U.S. businesses to plan. And uncertainty is the enemy of economic investment and growth, so we need to get these things settled. But it doesn't seem like that is going to happen anytime soon. On Thursday, a federal appeals court temporarily reinstated President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs when it granted the Trump administration's request for a temporary stay of the original ruling. The appeals court ruled that the request for an immediate administrative stay is granted to the extent that the judgments and the permanent injunctions entered by the Court of International Trade in these cases are temporarily stayed until further notice, while this court considers the motion's papers. Okay, so where do I come down on this? I know that a lot of people out there want to hear a commentator take a clear side and be 100% on that team without giving an inch. And a lot of the time, I do that, but only when it is my sincere position. Some cases, however, are complicated. When that happens, pretending that the situation isn't complicated in order to be on one team or the other is being dishonest. And I try my best not to do that. This is one of those cases because both sides are right and both sides are wrong. So, here's my position. Have we seen a lot of blatant overreach coming out of our local courts? Yes. Is that a major problem that needs to be addressed and remedied by the Supreme Court? Yes. Is this a case of judicial overreach where a judge is letting their personal politics dictate their ruling, and their ruling is extending beyond their authority? No. The panel was bipartisan, and they were issuing a ruling on a subject that falls within that court's jurisdiction. So, I agree with this ruling. No. I think that the judge's interpretation of the law concerning the fentanyl tariffs is wrong. And it's pretty clear that it's wrong in the act, if you read the last few paragraphs. This act allows the president to levy tariffs in order to deal with a national emergency. A national emergency was declared concerning the fentanyl crisis, given the hundreds of thousands of our citizens that have been poisoned, and Trump did declare that situation to be a national emergency. He used the tariffs to pressure Mexico, Canada, and China into dealing with the problems inside their own country so that less fentanyl gets into ours. Under this act, all of that falls under his authority as president. The judge's ruling is wrong, and that is why this is being examined in the Court of Appeals. However, that does not make this a case of overreach or corruption. It is just a bad ruling. Does that mean that I agree with the argument that some people are making that the voters elected Trump and therefore judges who rule against issues that he campaigned on and that the people indirectly voted for are violating our democracy by doing so? No. The president's powers are limited, just like the court's powers and just like Congress's powers. If he promises something that he doesn't actually have the authority to deliver, then even if the people voted for it, he's not allowed to exceed his powers, and the other branches are right to stop him even if the people like his idea. That is part of their responsibility. As the other branches of government, they are supposed to check and balance each other. Now, you might ask, don't the other branches need to be stopped when they overstep their powers, as they have been doing on a regular basis lately? Yes, they do. My position is that everyone needs to play by the rules. It's not, those people are breaking the rules, so it's okay for these people to break the rules too. To sum up, is there overreach by rogue judges going on? Yeah. Is this another case of that happening? No. Is the ruling valid? Yes. The court has the authority to issue this ruling. There is no funny business going on. Is the ruling correct? No. Does that mean that I support and approve of the tariffs in question and want to see this ruling struck down so that the tariffs can remain in place? I want the ruling struck down because it's incorrect. Do I want the tariffs to remain in place? On Mexico and China, yes. On Canada, no. Canada complied and upped their security to limit fentanyl. I don't see after that why their tariffs should continue. Do I like the general tariff policies on multiple nations? Am I in favor of the tariffs that have nothing to do with fentanyl? I'm in favor of a few of them, yes. The rest, not so much. So if I don't like the majority of the tariffs, then why don't I just side with this ruling? Because I don't take sides based on what I personally like and what I personally want to see happen. I choose sides based on what is right and based on what preserves the way that our system is designed to work, even when that means that I don't get my way. Now, in a follow-up to one of our stories from last week, Congressman Andy Ogles of Tennessee, who sits on the Homeland Security Committee, announced that he is launching an investigation into the office of Nashville's Democrat Mayor, Freddie O'Connell, based on claims that the city's officials are actively obstructing ICE. You may remember that Mayor O'Connell issued an executive order requiring civil servants in Nashville to report any communications that they have with federal immigration officials directly to the mayor's office, and he condemned successful ICE raids in Nashville for causing, and I quote, deep community harm. Unlike the dangerous illegal criminal gang members that they are rounding up who are apparently harmlessly raping, killing, trafficking, and selling deadly fentanyl to kids. I guess in Freddie's world, all of that causes absolutely no harm at all to American communities, while the getting of those people off of our streets, where they have no right to be as illegal alien criminals, that is deeply harmful to us. Yeah, keep singing that song and selling that tall tale, and see how many people gather around you to cheer you on. It's unfortunate for you that most people aren't stupid. Concerning the investigation that he has launched, Congressman Ogles told the Daily Wire, MS-13 and Tren de Aragua, they're all over the country. They're in Nashville. They're in our small cities like Columbia and Tullahoma. This is a message to cities and mayors across the country. If you impede federal law enforcement in their duties, in their directive to follow President Trump, to say it's time that we start deporting these folks, we're going to be looking into your city, and where appropriate, we're going to hold you accountable. Ogles also noted that it is especially important to cleanse Nashville of these cartels because it is a city that is centrally located within a 6-hour drive of many of America's major populated hubs, making it perfect to use as a way station for human trafficking and the drug trade if the cartels continue to be allowed to establish footholds there under sanctuary policies that have been allowed to shield them, which is why Congressman Ogles vowed the violent gangs in Central and South America. They want strongholds in Nashville, and I'm not going to stand for it. Immediately after the investigation was announced, Nashville's mayor, Freddie O'Connell, doxed multiple federal ICE agents by releasing their private information, and that prompted a justified, fiery reaction from the Department of Homeland Security and Senator Marsha Blackburn, who correctly accused the mayor of putting law enforcement lives at risk. O'Connell's office released interactions that they had had between ICE agents and Nashville Emergency Services personnel, including data that listed the names of federal law enforcement personnel. O'Connell says that the names were released by mistake, but the Department of Homeland Security isn't convinced. Neither am I. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said, "They claimed it was a mistake. There's zero chance it was a mistake, and there will be repercussions. Our ICE enforcement officers are already facing a 400% increase in assaults against them, and he's essentially handing over intelligence to these criminal gangs so they can target our ICE enforcement officers. It's wrong. It's beneath the city of Nashville." Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee condemned O'Connell, accusing him of putting ICE agents and law enforcement in harm's way by releasing their names for criminal gangs to see. These men and women have risked their lives to make our communities safer by removing gangs, rapists, and other heinous criminals from our communities. Shame on him. And whether you like the deportations or not, ICE officials are risking their lives to follow orders. If you don't like the policy, then blame the people who make the policy. Do not risk the lives of people who devote their lives to protecting you. An exclusive report from the Daily Wire revealed that of the 196 illegal aliens that were arrested by ICE in Nashville in a week-long raid, 95 of them had prior criminal convictions or pending criminal charges. Included in the nearly 200 illegal aliens arrested by ICE in Music City are sex offenders, convicted rapists, Trendy Aragua and MS-13 members, and drug runners, as well as 31 people who had already been deported and blatantly re-entered the United States, which is a felony offense. So, what is my take? Whether this is an accident or not doesn't really matter. This is a serious incident, and the consequences need to be severe and fit the crime so that anyone else who might be tempted to repeat this little stunt will be made to see with their own eyes exactly what it will cost them if they do. Zero tolerance for an act that deliberately puts the people who protect us at risk of retaliation by the frickin' cartels. Prison needs to be involved. And no, that is not an overreaction. That is an entirely proportional reaction to deliberately setting up a situation where our protectors and even their families can be targeted by the lowest life scum on the planet. You have lost your mind and all reasonable perspective, and you need to be bitch slapped back into reality. On Wednesday night, after Elon Musk announced that he was leaving his role, heading up the Department of Government Efficiency, he made it clear that his decision was because of a rule that limits special government employees to serving for no longer than 130 days, rather than the decision being due to any rumored feud between him and President Trump. Even though this move has been anticipated for a while now, given that Musk has made recent remarks indicating that he would soon be returning to focusing on his business ventures, rumors of a fallout were sparked by Musk's public criticism of the Big Beautiful Bill that has been championed by President Trump. Earlier this week, Musk said, "I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decreases it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing." Musk added, I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both. My personal opinion. It's an opinion that I agree with. There are some good things in this bill that really need to be passed right now, like tax cuts, funds for Border Patrol, and the military, including the Golden Dome project, etc. But we cannot keep up with this astronomical pandemic-level spending. A level of spending that was completely unprecedented in our government's budgets before COVID happened. We certainly can't increase spending, which this bill does. We just can't keep doing this. It is completely unsustainable. You may not like me for saying it, but at least I'm showing you the respect of telling you the truth, instead of treating you like a child and patronizing you with promises that I can't keep. Choosing this path is guaranteed to take us right over the cliff, Thelma and Louise style, and soon. We can either get real and do what has to be done now, when it will actually do us some good, and change our course by getting the physically fit people and the people with minor health issues back into the workforce, by raising the retirement age by a couple of years, etc., unpleasant as all of those adjustments will be. Or we can put it all off and buy ourselves a few more years, but only a few, while we ignore reality. And then, at the end of those couple of years, we will be forced into some very harsh and extremely painful cuts, including to the necessities that people depend on, as we are left with no choice but to adopt austerity measures while our country follows the trajectory of Great Britain and sinks. That is the situation here, like it or not. Now, as far as Elon goes, I would just personally like to express my heartfelt thanks for what you did for all of us and what you did for America. You put your own businesses on the back burner and set aside your own ambitions concerning your many impressive pursuits in order to audit a government that was ripping us off. Doing all of this while taking no salary for your valuable time and expertise, and while getting nothing in return except trouble and a deranged backlash from a bunch of truly unhinged people who have completely lost their grip on reality and have therefore resorted to domestic terrorism, causing you to take a loss in your businesses and in you receiving death threats and being endlessly slandered. And now, having done what you committed to us that you would do, you didn't grow addicted to the power and hang on for life. Yes, I'm looking at you lifelong politicians in D.C. right now. But like George Washington, you did your part, and then you walked away. You're a hero, man. And you're a true American patriot. Hopefully, all of Doja's cuts will be made permanent in order to preserve what you have accomplished at great personal sacrifice. But either way, you have my gratitude and the gratitude of America. In other branches of the government, on Friday, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump can revoke the so-called protected status of more than 500,000 migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, greenlighting deportations. The unsigned decision is not a final ruling on the case, but it does allow the Trump administration to continue its mass deportation efforts while the appeal process for the president's order plays out in the courts. Far-left Justices Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor were the only two judges who signed a written dissent. This ruling centers around Joe Biden's humanitarian parole program, which allowed migrants who claimed to be facing instability in certain countries to enter the United States en masse and receive work authorization. On his first day in office, President Trump signed an executive order ending the migrant parole program, and the Department of Homeland Security responded by moving to terminate the program in March. This order is being contested in the courts, but this Supreme Court ruling allows the reversal to stand until and unless it is ruled against completely, and that is a step in the right direction. But some people choose to head in the wrong direction, and apparently someone out there is impersonating President Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, using texts and phone calls, and the FBI is now investigating. Ms. Wiles is the first female chief of staff in U.S. history, and the Wall Street Journal reported that apparently her contacts were hacked on her personal cell phone, not her government cell phone. Other top officials in the Trump administration were contacted by the fraud using Ms. Wiles' identity. According to the Wall Street Journal, it became clear to some of the lawmakers that the requests were suspicious when the impersonator began asking questions about Trump that Wiles should have known the answers to, and in one case, when the impersonator asked for a cash transfer. Another clue that aroused suspicion was the broken grammar used by the impersonator. We've all been here, so this is your typical basement-level foreign scammer who just got in way over their head. Government officials believe that artificial intelligence was used to fake the messages. FBI Director Kash Patel stated, "The FBI takes all threats against the president, his staff, and our cybersecurity with the utmost seriousness. Safeguarding our administration's officials' ability to securely communicate to accomplish the president's mission is a top priority." On May 15th, the FBI had issued a public service announcement regarding attempts to impersonate U.S. officials, which stated, "Since April 2025, malicious actors have impersonated senior U.S. officials to target individuals, many of whom are current or former senior U.S. federal or state government officials and their contacts. If you receive a message claiming to be from a senior U.S. official, do not assume it is authentic. The malicious actors have sent text messages and AI-generated voice messages, techniques known as smishing and vishing, respectively, that claim to come from a senior U.S. official in an effort to establish rapport before gaining access to personal accounts. One way the actors gain such access is by sending targeted individuals a malicious link under the guise of transitioning to a separate messaging platform. Access to personal or official accounts operated by U.S. officials could be used to target other government officials or their associates and contacts by using trusted contact information they obtain. Contact information acquired through social engineering schemes could also be used to impersonate contacts to elicit information or funds. Last year, in 2024, Iranian agents attempted to hack Mrs. Wiles' email account while she was running Trump's campaign. Now wait, foreigners, scammers with a dislike of America who they call the Big Satan in their own official government meetings, a country that has tried to put out a hit on the man who is now president, and who have recently been defiantly declaring their intent to get a nuclear bomb no matter what happens in negotiations. Do you think? Nah. Our last story of the week involves some difficult news that was truly hard to hear. Theodis Daniel, the father of DJ Daniels, recently revealed that his son has 3 new tumors. DJ, you might remember as the boy who won the heart of Americans across the country when he was singled out by President Trump during his State of the Union address to Congress back in March. Daniel was the brave boy who had been diagnosed with brain cancer at the age of 6 and had subsequently undergone more than a dozen surgeries. At the address, DJ was made an honorary Secret Service agent in fulfillment of his lifelong dream, which led to a touching, gigantic hug for the agent who made this little boy's wish come true. The White House posted on X that they were lifting up young DJ in their prayers following the difficult news of his new diagnosis, saying, quote, "We're lifting up Agent DJ Daniels in prayer after his dad, Theodis, shared that DJ is now facing 3 new tumors. DJ is one of the strongest, bravest young men and has now been sworn into 1,351 law enforcement agencies across the country. Agent Daniel, you're a true legend." The White House also shared some sweet photos of DJ meeting with President Trump, and an especially sweet photo of him with First Lady Melania Trump the night that the world first met him. His father told Fox 7 down in Austin, Texas, that they were coping with the difficult news by, quote, "just winging it day by day. He does have 3 new tumors. It's rough. There isn't a class that can teach you how to deal with it. You're hearing that your child has a nasty disease." But his father also said that DJ is still a happy and vibrant child and admired his ongoing sense of humor. I'm just reminded that we live in a world where a sweet kid like this gets less attention than a teenager who chose to stab another boy in the chest to death over nothing. He gets rallied around and made into a hero and given over $500,000 that people raised for him. But who is rallying around this innocent child? Who is supporting him? Who is digging into their own pockets to help him? You know, we really do have to get back on track. It's easy for each one of us to end up being disillusioned if we allow ourselves to somehow lose our bearings. Without a North Star, the world around us becomes disorienting. But when you prioritize things correctly, the way that they should be, by aiming for what is highest, then you can keep yourself from getting lost in the deadly muck of the swamps below. Because that's how you end up losing yourself and losing everything that's good about your humanity. The key to avoiding that terrible fate is having a tried and true frame of reference that you can reliably use to bring yourself into alignment so that you can stay on track. I would encourage everyone out there to try to reorient themselves towards what actually matters and helping the people who actually deserve our support. Well, that's it for me. You're all caught up on what happened last week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please help me build this podcast into a success by clicking the like and follow buttons, because that is what does the trick in making these things successful. And I hope you come back again next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.